international boundaries. In other words, all the activities and policies directing principles of the National Boundary Commission is being charted by the professor. So we in the National Boundary Commission, he is our father. All our activities are based on his research work. The African Union border communities that the National Boundary, African Union border program that the National Boundary Commission have pioneered, it was the research work of Professor Anthony Asiwaju. And going back the memory lane before the creation of the National Boundary Commission, the management of Nigeria's international and internal boundaries were very, very chaotic. But the management of the international boundaries, especially some aspect of it were being managed by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, part of it by the Federal Service, part of it by composite authorities. Similarly, in the internal boundaries, it was something else, skirmishes, fightings here and there. So with his research work, the federal government have done something called the National Boundary Commission. Of course, he was not alone. There are some of his colleagues, but he was the chief driver of that policy. So we in the National Boundary Commission, we lack words when we are called upon to comment or pass our goodwill or any message on Professor Anthony Asiwaju. He is our pillar. He is the pillar of boundary management in Nigeria. So we pray that this compendium is going to be useful. Is here for posterity, is here for our international institutions that deals with border management or history or political science. They will find it very, very useful. I assure them and I call on the head of institutions to benefit from this research work that is contained in this compendium. We pray for the long life of the professor. We pray for everybody to enjoy his immense resource in academic research. We pray that this justice and the posterity will do justice to his research work by making this compendium to be relevant in each and every corner of it, in each and every aspect of it. So I thank everyone for attending this occasion, and I thank Your Excellency, the Vice President, for finding time to grace this occasion through your Deputy Chief of Staff. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Surveyor Mustafa Rubadu. We still have a lot of people from the National Boundaries Commission's family. One of them, of course, is a former DG of the National Boundary Commission, who went on to become a permanent secretary before he retired, but has never retired as a very close friend and confidant of the author. Let's especially welcome Professor Bauru Bakindo. Please put your hands together for him. Thank you, sir. Thank you. We have also with us the President of the Society for International Relations Awareness, SIRA, Dr. Owe Lakemfa. You're welcome. Please put your hands together for him. A special person also, and also formerly of the National Boundaries Commission, who also retired as a director in the civil service. She is the author's sister-in-law, she has a very special place in his heart. Let's specially welcome Mrs. Tera Adewigbe. Please put your hands together for her. Thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you. So we will take one more goodwill message, and then we'll move on to the panel.
The Vice President of the Federation, ably represented by the Deputy Chief of Staff, the Chairman of the occasion, the distinguished Senator, Kabesi, all the other members of the high table, my distinguished members of the lower table, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, back in BUK, in the 1970s, we were intrigued by a publication by one Dr. Tony Asiwaju on Western Yoruba. We knew of only one Asiwaju at that time. That was Garba Asiwaju, who was our teacher. And he swore that he did not write that book. First of all, we were intrigued by the book because before then, all histories that we were taught about Yoruba emanated from Oyo, either before or after Oyo. This is the first book that is talking of another Yoruba group, Western group. Secondly, this book was talking of colonial rule. And what we knew of colonial rule at that time was emphasis on British colonial rule. Now, this is a book that is comparing the British and the French colonial rule in on the Western Yoruba. It took a very long time before that type of study dawned on historians. In fact, it was almost a decade before similar studies started to be written by Miles, for example, on Hausa, by Niget, and others. So in actual fact, that book was a trailblazer of sorts. And that is book one that we are actually talking about. I knew Asiwaju, he was introduced to me when he was embarking on another trailblazing publication that was the Partition of Africans. That was when I was introduced to him. And luckily for me, I participated in that book. And that was the beginning of our association till date. Because after that, we were thrown in again to do the NIP study on Nigerian Buddhists. Lest I forget, the book, before I leave that, the study, Western Yoruba land under colonial rule, was a PhD thesis. To many of us, once you finish a PhD on a subject, you move on. But for Asiwaju, he stayed on the subject till date. Which means the Yoruba under colonial rule was not only a PhD thesis, but a thesis of which he tried to expand on and work on it to date. I also learned something from him. That once you finish a PhD, you can really continue, you can make it a laboratory to keep on working on it. So it came to me that my Mandara studies should actually be a laboratory, should be a thesis that I should continue, which I really thank him for that. But more impactfully, the representative of the DG actually said it. The coming of Professor Asiwaju to National Boundary Commission was a blessing. He came as a pioneer commissioner of international boundaries. Yours sincerely also was there, first of all, as a pioneer director of Research and Documentation Center. But more than that, he was actually the idea of so many happenings that took place at the National Boundary Commission. He introduced the Transborder Cooperation Workshops between Nigeria and her present borders, based on the European Convention, which actually led to the European Union. And we really went on and discussed that and did Transborder Cooperation Workshop with almost all our neighbors. And the result has been published for posterity. Secondly, he organized a conference on border development. I learned that the director of Border Development Agency is here. It emanated from a conference that Asiwaju led us actually to do. Professor Ibrahim is actually looking at me, telling me that I should get about 1 or 2 minutes. Mr. Chairman, I think I will stop here, because once I start talking about Asiwaju, I may take the whole time. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. That's from one very close friend to another. The rest of us in this matter, we know our boundaries. A man sent a message to his friend that he just got fired from his job at Google Maps because his daughter said he was not respecting her boundaries. We have one, but this is from the Executive Secretary, Border Communities Development Agency. Let's welcome the representative of the ES, Ibrahim Kwajafu, will do us the honors of giving us one more goodwill message before we constitute our panel. Please put your hands together for him.
His Excellency, the Vice President, Federal Republic of Nigeria, ably represented by the Deputy Chief of Staff to the President, His Royal Highness, the Onimiko of Imeko, the Chairman of the occasion. Please permit me to stand on the already established protocol in order to avoid the temptation of falling into serious pitfall. I stand here as the representative of the Executive Secretary, Border Communities Development Agency, to carry his goodwill message on this very, very auspicious occasion. The Executive Secretary had this morning to lead some part of the management to an important government engagement. But he has directed me to express his profound gratitude and delight in being invited to attend this occasion and to also give a goodwill message. Professor Asiwaju to the agency, he is
I would say literally the creator of the agency. But more importantly, his studies over the last 5 decades has had tremendous impact on border matters in the country. We note that his studies and researches over the years has actually defined the nature, the scope, and the character of border studies in Nigeria, in Africa, and the world at large. In terms of policy impact, the creation of the National Boundary Commission and the Border Communities Development Agency, which I represent, is the outcome of his impact on the intellectual fermentation processes precedent to the establishment of these agencies and their operations. Clearly, in the acts establishing these agencies, the imprint of Professor Asiwaju is well seen in terms of defining the borders and the boundary of Nigeria, and also in terms of the mandate defining what the border communities should do in the provisions of amenities and development of the border communities in the country. Indeed, we recognize his technical expert role at the 1989 workshop on border region development whose logical outcome and laudable enduring outcome is the establishment of the Border Communities Development Agency. This compendium to us in the Border Community Agency has helped to once more inform us that the border communities in the country, and not only the country but also neighboring countries, are a product of experiences preceding the colonization of this country. And the fact that there were one people and there have been one people, and therefore in whatever we do as an agency, we should look at the border areas as areas of bridge building, integration, and peaceful coexistence. These books have also helped us to understand that there is a need for the 3 levels of government in Nigeria to jointly share in the cost of developing the border areas in the country. That is the federal, the state, and the local government areas in the country. But even more importantly, that these areas should continue to be recognized bridge building. And finally, that the border communities in the country should be given special consideration in terms of development. And it is for these reasons that the Border Communities Development Agency has been created. Mr. Chairman, sir, the Border Communities Development Agency, in recognition of the importance of this great academic and intellectual contribution, has decided to place copies in the universities of Calabar, the University of Ibadan, the University of Sokoto, and the University of Maiduguri. These are universities located in the border states of the country. We pray that the Almighty will continue to grant our professor the strength, the good health to continue to contribute to mankind. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. He has already started the main job why I was hired. But thank you very much. We'll come back to Rosa, both for the speech and for the last paragraph. Well, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we will have gone ahead to take our panel, but we have one important group, and that is the Committee of Vice Chancellors. They're led by Professor Yakubu Chefu, who is, of course, a renowned scholar, but is represented here by Dr. Oro, who will speak on behalf of the Committee of Vice Chancellors. A very short goodwill message, and after that we'll take our panel. Please put your hands together for him as he comes up. Today is about finished research.
Chairman of this occasion, please permit me to stand on the protocol that has been established so far. I am representing Professor Yakubu Abuki Ochefu, the Secretary General of the Committee of Vice Chancellors of Nigerian Universities. He has asked me to apologize to Professor Anthony Asiwaju because he has not been here in person. He has to attend to official activities outside Nigeria that he could not reschedule. He sent this message, goodwill message, to me, and wants me to read it out, at this occasion. And I now read. Goodwill message in honor of Professor Anthony Asiwaju on the occasions of the public presentation of his compendium on Nigeria and African border governance, history, and historiography. Professor Asiwaju is a world-class, a world-renowned historian, and currently stands as Nigeria's most widely published professional historian in border studies. In the past 50 years, he has contributed significantly to developing Nigeria, Africa, and global historical studies in border studies. Diplomatic history, social history, intellectual history, historical methodology, comparative development studies, and comparative development studies. In the past 40 years, he has published 10 full-length, 150 chapters, articles, monographs, and policy documents. He has also trained 3 generations of professional historians who are senior professors in their own right, who currently ply their trade in universities in Nigeria, the United Kingdom, the United States of America, Canada, Brazil, to mention a few. Asiwaju's publications have won awards and prizes at the global level, some of which remain the classic text that others are built upon. A clear example of the partitioned Africa, ethnic relations across Africa's international border, 1884 to 1984, was published in 1985. His 2021 book titled Ketu and Imeku, Yoruba Twin City, astride the Benin-Nigeria border in West Africa, published by Routledge, discusses the divergent historical trajectories significantly impacted by legacy of differential European colonial rule,
and post-colonial nation-building tradition. Let me mention two of your work with a lifelong messages. One, the artificial boundary, an inaugural lecture delivered at the University of Lagos, Wednesday, 12 December 1984. This lecture was given to mark the centenary of the Berlin West African Conference from 15 November 1884 to 26 February 1885. According to your account, the message in this lecture is that the Berlin Conference took place at the absolute exclusion of African representation. The second, which impresses me, is the migration as revolution. The migration as revolt. The second is the migration as revolt. The example of the Ivory Coast and the Upper Volta before 1945, published in 2009. This work contributed to African protest movement during the era of colonial rule. According to your account, migration marked disapproval of the colonial policy in this context. One wonders if we can conclude that the current wave of migration out of Nigeria and the other part of the world has a similar message. In summary, when we aggregate Professor Asiwaju's academic work, his epistemological exposition as a pioneer of knowledge in border studies, his academic and administrative leadership as pioneer director of Nigerian Boundaries Commission, his penchant for identifying, grooming, nurturing, mentoring, and exposing new academic talents, and the glory and honor he brings for his country in terms of prizes, awards, and recognition at the global level. Professor Anthony Asiwaju, by my estimation, deserves a National Merit Award. Thank you. Professor Yakubu Ochefu, Professor of Economic History and Secretary General, Committee of Vice Chancellors of Nigerian Universities.
Thank you very much. Please put your hands together for him. He had originally planned a lecture, but when it fell into a goodwill message, we had to take it as a goodwill lecture. Thank you, sir. We will especially appreciate a few people who have joined us. Barrister Tola Olorunfumi is President of Ogun State Indigenous Forum in Abuja. You're welcome. Thank you very much. We have also M.A. Akinlade, LCA. Alhaji Rotimi Yusuf is the Vice President of Yewa Descendants Union, Abuja. You're welcome. Please let's appreciate them for coming to support one of their own. The next item, very quickly, is the panel. The panel is a special one because it talks about two things. It talks about, on the one hand, the impact of this scholar on other scholars, and also to be able to chart a new course for them to see what has been done and what is left undone so they can focus on those things moving forward. Well, we have three people who will be on this panel, and a fourth is the moderator. It's hard to talk about them in total because of time. But about 10 years ago, the emeritus professor and author for today, he put together a team of young persons, young as at that time, not so young right now, who came to Imeko and they sat down to think about what can be done, what influence he can have on future scholars or researchers and on borderline studies. That meeting has brought together, has produced a lot of younger people who are not so young now, who in their own rights can hit their chest and say we have also succeeded from his influence. And that's going to be the focus of this panel. Two of them are on this panel who attended that meeting 10 years ago. One of them is Dr. Andrew So. He works with the FCT administration, but he's also had gone ahead to take a PhD bordering around issues of border studies. Please put your hands together for him as he joins us on the chair. We also have the other who has been a consultant on DFID-funded facilities for oil sector transformation managed by the Oxford Policy Management. Has also written his writings and projects, management experience, has also been able to affect people for decades. He has also worked on projects aimed at translating concepts and policies into concrete solutions. We're told that he was one-time commissioner in Plateau State, and that explains why he came all the way from Jos this morning driving himself. He's also of the Modibo Adama University. Let's welcome, also mixing two of them now. First, let me welcome Dr. Dauda Garba, who is with us here. He has worked with ECOWAS and issues on ECO project. He was also helping on issues around natural resource management. Please let's welcome Dr. Dauda Garba first. Then the second will be Dr. Chris, who is one-time commissioner in Plateau State. He also works now at Modibo Adama University. Dr. Chris Kwanji came all the way from Jos this morning. Thank you very much for your time. So the one who will help us moderate this, we wanted to force him to sit on the high table, but he said, no, I belong with the people, having studied political science, both in practical terms as an aluta, as well as one who went ahead to have a PhD in political science. Let's also allow the moderator, who is currently the country director for CARE International, Dr. Hussein Abdu. Please put your hands together for our panel. Please, let's clap for this panel.
Oh, okay. Send it to me. I will send it. I will send it to panel. Okay, thank you very much. Those of us who try to run away from high tables and protocol, we have a way of standing on existing protocol. And this morning, afternoon, I'll be sitting on existing protocol. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. It's quite exciting being part of this very important event. And I think it's not just a book presentation, it's also for me a celebration of this very important scholar and who had inspired quite a lot of us over the years. I think before I get to my colleagues to make a few comments around how Prof's work had inspired them over the years, it's important to state that Professor Asiwaju is a mentor of my own mentors. So I want to believe some of us are here, either his second generation or third generation mentors, because he mentored our mentor, and Jobo is also my mentor and teacher. I had Professor Nuyaku also say that, and he's also my teacher and mentor. I had some of the excellent words that Professor Barkindo also mentioned. And I can really say that these are our teachers, these were people who inspired us. So Prof is been a mentor of our own mentors. And for me, quickly, before I get into the conversation with my colleagues, I think one thing that brought me very close to Professor Asiwaju was my work on the Partition Barugu, State Society and Politics in the West African border region. And that I got into that work, first, other than historian, I'm a political scientist, and also taught in that classical conception of what borders mean, particularly within that Westphalian conception as defined. And therefore, getting into this, I wanted to approach that work a bit differently. And I didn't know there is a whole body of work around borders beyond the conversations within international politics or international relations. So the first thing you do traditionally is to begin to comb the literature and find who has done what in this field. And then two striking scholars, and then J.C. Anini, who was one of those early generations scholars of West African borders, and then Professor Asiwaju. And then I kept combing and consistently seeing different kinds of works that Professor Asiwaju has done, and you see that element of consistency all through. And I want to believe that was what Professor Barkindo was trying to refer to. This is a work that has spanned across about four decades. And reading through his work across 4 decades, and what you see is that level of consistency and building. His later day works seems to give us what we love to call praxis, and that capacity to combine his theoretical understanding of some of this issue and the practical reality. And probably because he's been able to influence border policies and has had a very good feel about it. And a very typical example of that is if you read about his transfrontier regionalism, and drawing inspiration from the European Union. And I think Professor Barkindo is now that I'm getting to understand that there were workshops around that. It was an excellent piece in terms of conversations on regional integration and the role that border communities could actually play. Because the general conversations on border and border communities has been more exclusive of the communities themselves. So there are people speaking for them, writing for them, discussing them. But the transfrontier regionalism brings something different, where they become active player even in international relations. And I think this has been quite excellent. And if you look through the body of work that Prof has done, I really felt blessed that I've met him. Initially, I related with him, just like you do with some of these trailblazer scholars. You first meet them through their work, and then you start wondering whether you will ever meet them physically. And then it happened that at the point that extremely encouraging. Even me, I didn't know that I've done that much, except until I started reading what he wrote about the book. And along the line, after I got done with the work and receiving comment from other people, make all the changes, then I wanted Prof to give me a blurb, and I shared the work again with him, and he came back and said, no, Hussaini, I will give you more than a blurb. I'm happy to do a forward to that book. And that forward was more like an introductory chapter. Unbelievable. And Prof, I thank you so much for the encouragement, for this inspiration. I would have probably done better in border works. I think Prof wanted to put me in his armpit and take me around all those border conversations, debate and discussions. But unfortunately, my hands are full and I struggle for time and space to get this done. So Prof, I thank you. I want to believe that all my colleagues here, 3 of us, have in one way or the other have interacted with Prof, and I just want to at least share perspective in terms of how Prof have inspired us, and we will come back to look at what are these gaps in this field of study in country and what we can actually do differently. I will start with Dr. Andre. So, Andre, let's hear from you. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Before I started hearing anything about borderland studies, I have known Prof. I will call him Daddy. So permit me if I continue calling him Daddy for this conversation. 2008, he admitted me into the African Regional Institute in Mekong, where we participated in international boundaries and motherland studies course. And after the first encounter with him, my life changed. I had a different focus when I got there. I was more interested in development studies and all that. But when I got there, my perception about all that changed. Because funny enough, as at that time, my local government, I discovered, shared international boundary with Cameroon. I never knew. It was when I got there that I saw that. I never knew that Benue State had boundaries with Cameroon. It was when I was in Mekong that I discovered that. And in the course of my studies, I discovered that it was a 40-kilometer stretch of borderline. And every experience, everything I experienced in Mekong, when I went for my field work, I saw all these things in these communities. First and foremost, there was something he told us that border communities are largely ungoverned spaces. And, you know, my thinking of an ungoverned space is a place that is maybe sparsely populated or not populated or not having any human presence at all, maybe a land that, or a vegetation that doesn't have people living there. But you go to a complete community, you find people, you find all kinds of people there, but you don't see governance, you don't see government. And I experienced it when I went to all the communities, most of the border communities I visited in Kwande local government area of Benue State in the course of my research. I discovered everything that Prof told us were the things. I even saw more. Because some of these communities, you will not even believe that you are in Nigeria. No presence of government, no police, no school, no hospitals, but the people are just there. And you keep wondering, is this Nigeria? You know, and my experience at the Mekong was something that spurred me into that field of study. And I really thank Prof for opening my eyes to it. And I intend to do more because I've seen what he has done at Mekong, and I intend to do the same in these border communities, to do more research and more work to get these communities also put on the map, because everybody knows about the borders in the western Nigeria, but when you look for literatures, you find a lot of things written about border communities in the north, in western Nigeria and all that, but you don't see anything written on border communities in Benue State. So it's something that I want to work on and put them on the map. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Andrew. So next we will get Dr. Dauda Garuba, and let's hear from you.
Yeah, thank you very much, and permit me to, like you said, stand on existing protocol or sit on existing protocol. But despite that, I also want to stand to thank my lecturer, Professor Olayemi Akiwumi, who taught me history at the University of Ilorin. And to say that I had the opportunity of learning historiography from the contemporary of Professor Asiwaju. And that's the person of Dr. Saka Balogun when I was still at the University of Ilorin. That was in between 1988 and 1990. And one thing that marveled me about Dr. Saka Balogun was his capacity to speak English, Arabic, and French. And as a student of history, I took my elective in Arabic language. So I kept asking myself, how was he able to make it? The answer to that question did come until like 15 years ago, or close to 18 years ago, when I had the opportunity of meeting one-on-one with Professor Asiwaju. Of course, I came to know him through his son-in-law, who was a colleague at the Center for Democracy and Development, where we both worked. And in the course of our interaction, he then told me that it was cardinal to those who were reading history then, that if you were working in a particular area, you needed to learn the language, the foreign language of those areas, to be able to work with the materials that you are going to be using in your research. So that was how Professor Saka Balogun, or Dr. Saka Balogun, learned Arabic language, because he worked on the northern, while he worked in the border communities. And from what I have realized over time, it wasn't just scholarship for Professor Asiwaju. He lived, it was a life he lived, and further complemented by scholarship. So in that context, I think that it led me into an area I didn't really understand until I got that opportunity to interact with him. The second point of engagement was also in the Center for Democracy and Development, where I was senior program officer covering issues of peace and security in the entire West African region. And I had to engage several of the conflicts, including those that had to do with natural resources and other things, which of course was also at the center of my master's degree, which is actually in the post-Cold War era. Then there was this critical issue about the Bakassi, and we thought, as a senior program officer in charge of peace and security, we thought of organizing a forum where we would get an expert to come and speak to this issue. And that also brought us very close to Professor Asiwaju. He came and made a very powerful presentation. And for the first time, I had the opportunity of looking at two key diverse positions on what Bakassi means to Nigeria and what it was not supposed to be for Nigeria. The position espoused by Asiwaju was that of an expert, and who is supposed to know as an expert of international boundaries who owns Bakassi. But there was again another brilliant scholar, though not an expert on the issue, was there challenging the position of the professor. And that fellow today is of blessed memory, Dr. Obadiah Melafia. It was a very interesting engagement. At the end of it all, I think that for some of the language that was used in those exchanges, ordinarily, for somebody in my position, I would have been annoyed. And I saw a very quiet grandfather that would take things very easily and would marshal the point, and at the end, he was able to drive his argument to a logical conclusion. Those were for the first time, he was complimenting what my teacher, English language teacher in the secondary school said: when you are annoyed, don't write. But after that explanation, or after the conversation, I then added to it that when you are annoyed, don't write and don't talk. The last bit of my engagement, he gave me the opportunity to attend the Imeko school. I had so much on my hand in CDD because I needed to stay for a length of time. And you have to be resident fellow in order to enjoy that. And CDD wasn't ready to give me that update because it was also part of knowledge production that would have enabled me to move much more than I eventually got. But again, since then, the interaction has really never ended. A couple of 1 or 2 weeks ago, I got this call that there was going to be this event. I said, Prof, I'll have to come and see you first at home where you are staying with your daughter and the son-in-law. I went there and we were having this conversation. I'm moving to the third issue, after which I'll stop talking. And the question I asked is, Prof, how is Imeko, the center at Imeko? He told me that the center has one down, but the institute is still there. And largely there were 2 key issues responsible. Prof is getting old, and funding is also getting shrinking. And I then asked myself, Prof, this is of concern to us because there have been several of such centers across the country that are today down. I know of the Center for Advanced Social Science in Port Harcourt, founded by Professor Claude Akweya. I remember the reason behind the foundation, and I also remember at a major conference like this, he was given 5 minutes to tell what he wants to do with that center, and after speaking for 5 minutes, the Swedish government put down $5 million to start that center. I know of Africa by Professor A.T. Ghana. I know of CRD in Kano, where I was also a laureate, and several other centers that are today were supposed to be manufacturing or producing knowledge. But today, funding has not allowed that to happen, largely because philanthropy is a key African problem. If you find any of the centers that are working today, watch very closely, is externally funded. Professor Claude Akweya's chair in Nordic African Institute of Uppsala is functioning today to its fullest, but the center he established that is supposed to be the base for knowledge production in Africa is not functioning. But this is where I want to submit that there is much that we need to do as a people in driving the knowledge production, especially if you were to read Claude Akweya's famous classic on social science as imperialism. If we are to produce knowledge that is African, we need to find a way to fund such grand institute that should be able to generate the kind of knowledge that we need in Nigeria. But I must also say, in terms of the border issues that has been the life lived and canvassed or written on by Professor Asiwaju, every day I come close to those things. My PhD thesis was on oil theft. Before that, my master's thesis was on the post-Cold War ripple effect of the struggle for natural resources, like you had in Somalia, like you had in Liberia, in Guinea, and other countries. And in the course of trying to look at the global roots of oil theft, I found myself, or local theft, I found myself getting involved with issue of the cross-border criminal activities that are going on, dealing with those issues around Gebu to Cameroon, around Republic of Benin, around Ileila. I've been to Ileila in the course of my traveling in the West African sub-region. While talking to immigration officers, I see people crossing without being interrupted. I then realize that if you are not familiar and you want to cross that border, the immigration and the customs, they know that this is a stranger that is passing a familiar border, but himself is not familiar. So So these are some of the key stuff, and I think that as a country, both as government, as individuals that are endowed financially, we should find a way to fund philanthropy, especially those that contribute to knowledge production, such that we can attain the kind of development we want for Nigeria, as well as for the sub-region, also for Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Garwa. And lastly, I'll go to Dr. Chris Kwaja.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Asiwaju, for this very rare opportunity of sharing my own experience with participants. I met Professor Asiwaju in 2016. I was invited to Yola. Then I was with the Center for Conflict Management and Peace Studies, University of Jos. I was invited by the Vice Chancellor of the Center for Peace and Security, University of Ahmadu Bamba University of Technology, Yola, who also set up the Center for Peace and Security Studies in Yola, Professor Kyari Mohammed. Myself, Professor Asiwaju, and other scholars, where focus was on post-Boko Haram insurgency in Nigeria, what infrastructure for peace and security needed to be put in place. My presentation that day was on state responsibility to protect border communities in the context of the Lake Chad. And after that presentation, Professor Asiwaju called me and said, "Young man, you did very well. I'm happy with the arguments you put forward." And the focus on border, on activities in country, without looking at what the experiences of communities within border communities have been and how the insecurity caused by the insurgency is affecting their everyday lives. And from that moment, I got so close to him, and when he was clocking 80 in 2019, Kemi reached out to me and said, "Look, what can we do? Daddy will be 80. And I said, okay, Daddy has written quite a lot on border security, border studies, issues around borders in Africa. Is it possible for us to get some scholars that will look at aspects of what he has done over time, and we can now publish an edited book?" And that was how in 2021, we got a book out titled Security and Governance in the Context of Border in Africa, which was edited in his honor. Now, between 2016 and now, I have focused on issues around transnational crimes caused or perpetrated by non-state armed groups. The first set of actors in this regard are mercenaries, and I've done quite a lot of work on issues around mercenaries from 2016 to date. And by 2018, I was appointed a member of the United Nations Working Group on Mercenaries, representing Africa, for a 6-year term. And through that position, I've been able to also engage countries across the world on issues around mercenaries in the context of how mercenaries take advantage of weak borders to now create their own cells or recruit or mobilize people within those communities. And one of the key issues today is that it is not just about communities that are residing within these borders. It is also about the fact that the weakness or absence of states within these border areas have provided an opportunity for criminal groups to also take advantage of this gap and install or put in place their own governance infrastructure. And it is making it easy for them to recruit people. It is making it easy for them to even live with many of these communities where today, when you talk about local informants that are enriching, that are providing the kind of buffer that criminal groups are enjoying today, they are getting it from communities within those border communities. And that is an important area of interest both for scholars and policy makers alike. My work in the area of farmer-herder conflict, looking at the transnational character of the farmer-herder conflict, is that it is not a Nigerian thing alone, and that when ECOWAS set up the ECOWAS Protocol on Transhumans, which was basically to deal with this issue of movement of people and goods, it was also to look at how borders can be properly policed with the goal of ensuring that it does not provide the kind of safe haven or safety net that criminal groups use, and that many of the conflicts we see today and the crimes that are increasingly taking place across West Africa, they are occurring and succeeding because of the inability of African governments, ECOWAS, Nigerian government also, to really put in place the appropriate measures for dealing with issues around border security and governance. It is not just enough to provide water, health, and schools for the populations within those areas. Government must be seen to be very active. Government must be seen to be very strong in those areas, so that we also deconstruct the minds of people around this this whole notion of you just mentioned, I forgot now, ungovernable spaces. And these ungoverned spaces or ungovernable spaces are increasingly becoming real challenges for African societies in the context of what we do with this whole idea of dealing with governance issues around instances where criminal groups are now replacing the state. And in some communities, they are even levying people and using these monies to provide some kind of services or even credit facilities for these communities. That is the price we are paying today for state neglect of border communities. And my last point is that just recently, Ambassador Abdul-Zango and other colleagues within the diplomatic corps convened a very important meeting around Nigeria and her borders. And Professor Asiwaju gave the keynote address. And I think one very profound statement he made, and which he represents so well, is the convergence between the man of affairs and the man of science. As someone who worked within the National Boundary Commission, he was charged with the opportunity or the role of implementing certain policies of the state. And as a scholar, he has been able to produce knowledge that enrich these policies. And that is one key area we should be able to focus on, how we are able to strengthen relationship between those who produce knowledge and those who utilize this knowledge. And that is why the establishment of the center in Imeko is quite central to this conversation around the role of knowledge in helping us deal with many of the challenges that border communities face in Nigeria and Africa in general. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chris Kwaja. And I distinguished ladies and gentlemen, and I'm sure you've heard from these four of us on how Professor Asiwaju's work and Professor Asiwaju as a person inspired not just our work as individual scholars, but also our lives. And I think this is a strong message from this generation of scholars, that Professor Asiwaju's work has not only influenced national policies on borders, but have also encouraged a body of work and literature on this issue. And going through it, we've seen different perspectives across, from those who have been able to recognize that they actually live in the border region as a result of some of their interface with Professor Asiwaju, to all the conversations around Bakassi and some of the contentions that follows, and even the emerging issues around our borders and how the government failure has increasingly criminalized communities through massive criminal invasions and occupation. But the major challenge about this is, how do we talk about governability of our border communities in the context of a shrinking state, from the perception that the state is incapable of providing and that the market has to take the place of the state. And as today, Nigeria, if you know all the conversations, we're talking about elections, but what you hear is the emphasis on the economy, and that people think that the problem is economy and that the problem is not politics. But you don't get the politics right, you never get the economic right. And for some of us, from this political economy perspective, is to recognize that the politics of the border is as important as the economy of the border, and that any conversations around our borders that excludes the people will never find the right solutions to it. And this is a dimension that I have seen over the years, or in recent years, where there is more interest in the bureaucracy of the border than the people in our borders. And I think that we need to change, that's a policy dimension that we need to change and get, because the challenge we are seeing is that the borders communities are not only on the fringe of their respective countries, they are also excluded from the politics of their society, despite seeming representations within democratic context. So I think we want to thank Professor Asiwaju once again. I want to join my colleagues in thanking him, and we hope he will continue to be with us, to continue to inspire the conversations on this issue. I knew I was part of a process of a public hearing in the National Assembly to establish an institute on border studies. But I think since that public hearing, we've not heard, and I think I did make a presentation there. I did share the memo. We don't know where we are with it, but this is a study area that we need to continue to build, to develop. Nigeria is surrounded practically by land borders running in thousands, and it's important that we continue to study the people, to understand that well, and continue to work on our policies to ensure that our borders are actually part of the larger national community. So we want to thank you so much, and where's the MC? Thank you, colleagues. Thanks for being part of this conversation. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Please put your hands together for them. Thank you. We appreciate you for your time and for making it such an interesting discussion. Thank you. Well, the issue is about influence and about, we'll allow Daddy to say a few words before we go on.
Thank you very much. Your Excellencies, the representative of the Vice President, I'm like that panel. I'm not good at protocols. I just want to put in three footnotes to this fantastically brilliant panel. I want to thank them. And I want to thank the organizers of this public presentation for inserting this panel into the program. I've appealed to the distinguished Senator Adeola, who, by the way, is also the Aremo of Yewa land, to please bear with us. I don't want this audience, this hall that is already empty, to be further emptied. The first footnote I want to put into what has been so well said is about this book. There has been so much said about Professor Asiwaju and less about the book. The book is an advertisement of the discipline of history, and the compendium has been motivated by the need for tertiary level history readers. I happen to have pleaded guilty to any charge about pioneering comparative perspective to African history. This book, this compendium, advertises comparative history. And the way it has been applied over the past 50 years or more to two themes: comparative colonialism, French and British and others, on cross-border communities across Africa. That's number one. Number two about history is also to publicize history as an applied science. History as something that needs to be taken seriously by those in charge of public decision and public action. I have been privileged to apply the history of cross-border people to policy improvement on border issues in Africa. And I've been particularly opportune to have played that role at national level, to have played that role at West African level, to have played that role particularly at the level of African Union, which explains why the cover page carries the image of the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa. That's one. Number two, Adeleji Nodu just wrote me this while we were here, that I should remind this audience and I should remind the panelists that for them in political science, unfortunately Jibo has left, the way they have seen me in terms of having value at all is in terms of the practice of interdisciplinarity. The attraction for my kind of work, for attention of others in the social sciences and the humanities. Political science in particular was underscored by Claude Ake in his presentation, his keynote presentation to Historical Society of Nigeria Congress in Port Harcourt in 1987. History as the future of the social sciences. There is no way any single science, any single discipline can engage in problem solving except in connection with other disciplines. So interdisciplinarity and the participation of history and historians in interdisciplinary dialogue is critical. I thought I have tried also to sell that idea in this whole range of writings of the past 50 years. Finally, the issue of the future of the African Regional Institute in Emeko. I'm very grateful to Professor Abdul for bringing it up, and also for reminding, particularly the high table here, of the public hearing of Bill Senate Bill 266 for the establishment of the National Institute for Border Studies in Emeko. It was on that bill that I rested my hope for the future of that institute. And I am glad to let you know from what I've heard, and I'm glad that the Vice President is here, who is chairman both of the National Boundary Commission and of the National Border Community Development Agency, that Bill 266, since the public hearing of last year, had passed all the stages of legislation, including the concurrence of the House of Representatives, and is on the way to signature by Mr. President for it to become law. That is the information I have, and I've rested it in the hands of Professor Akweya, who is standing in for the presidency, to help us check and help us push so that it becomes a reality, at least in law. And I'm glad that the distinguished Senator Adeola is here, who whispered into my ears, talk to Professor Akweya. You will see that in the program, Senator Tolu Odebi was mentioned. It's a pity that we don't have him here. He was the originator of that bill, and he is in the hands of the Senate Committee on Tertiary Institutions and TED Fund. TED Fund was also invited there. I'm not sure whether they are here. So those are the three comments, and they provide some responses to some of the questions that were raised by the panel. I want to thank you most sincerely for your patience.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate you for that intervention. Someone had also sent me a note to share with you, reminding you that just shortly before Brexit, you had spoken a lot about the EU as a model for African unity, and it broke your heart a little when Brexit happened, and you were worried that for you, the greatest proponent of that today, however, is a little news in the open space that the man who succeeded David Cameron, who came at the back of Brexit, probably has thrown in the trowel. So probably that means some new things may begin to happen for us in the area of international border issues. Maybe we need to revisit that discussion again, sir. But thank you. Let's welcome the representative of the Commandant of the National Institute for Security Studies, Abuja, Alhaji A.S. Adeleke, MNI, who's represented by Dr. Steve Olufemi Ojelade, FSI. You're welcome. Please put your hands together for him. So to take us further, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's good that Daddy was able to do this pointer. Who knows, he may just give us further assurances on the bill and the assurances that it's on his table for signature. The representative of the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Professor Yemi Oshibanjo, GCON, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, who's represented here by one who is able to speak on his behalf, to tell us his mind, and to share with us the future of boundary issues, particularly around Emeko as it relates to us. Let's welcome Dr. Adeola Rahman Akweya. Please put your hands together for him.
Thank you very much. Chairman of this event, Professor Nuhu Yakub, a very distinguished teacher and author, Professor Anthony Asiwaju, His Royal Majesty the Onimeko of Imeko, Oba Benjamin Alabi, the Director of International Boundaries of the National Boundaries Commission, Surveyor Mustafa Ribadu, representative of the Border Community Development Authority, our chief launcher of today, the most distinguished Senator Adeola Olamileko, the Aremo of Yewa Land. Distinguished scholars here present, Professor Baworo Bakindo and several others who have spoken earlier. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I am most delighted to present this goodwill message on behalf of His Excellency, the Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, who is also Chairman, National Boundaries Commission, Border Community Development Agency, as earlier mentioned by Professor Asiwaju. Regrettably, the Vice President is unavoidably absent this afternoon. He sends his unreserved apology and had nominated me to represent him and to give his very best wishes and congratulatory message to Professor Anthony Asiwaju. And I will read his brief message to this audience. It is indeed a great pleasure to be part of today's historic occasion, the public presentation of what the author, Professor Anthony I. Asiwaju, aptly describes as his dream compendium of 4 books in one. The book provides a historical and reflective framework for understanding borders and an alternative policy for integrative and transformative border relations. Here, the author has demonstrated once again his well-acknowledged, very deep understanding of history and sociology, while elongating his already lengthy string of scholarly contributions to historical literature. No one could have given us this invaluable compendium except our celebrated author of today, Professor Anthony Asiwaju, a seasoned scholar, locally and internationally acclaimed as authority in border studies. It is easy to predict, therefore, that this book is destined to make a distinct and unique addition to the existing array of border studies literature, while providing a worthy insight into the evolution of African border settlements. The author is arguably one of Africa's leading comparative historian and border scholar of international repute, whose advocacy has been accepted as leading light at national, sub-regional, continental, and global levels. As many here may already know, Professor Asiwaju's policy advocacy led to the creation of the National Boundaries Commission, where he was pioneer and 2-term commissioner of international boundaries. Professor Asiwaju, along with other scholars of similar disposition, also generated and nurtured the ideas that led to the establishment of the African Union Border Program. His numerous books on border studies make very interesting and insightful reading and have been of great benefit to scholars, researchers, and policymakers. His works will no doubt be of great use to all the border states, as well as government agencies like the National Boundaries Commission, National Institute of Policy and Strategic Studies, Border Community Development Agency, the Immigration Service, the Nigerian Customs Service, and the police. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of His Excellency Professor Yemi Osinbajo, SAN, Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria and Chairman of the National Boundaries Commission, I wish to conclude by congratulating once again our erudite scholar, Emeritus Professor Anthony Asiwaju, for the successful publication and launch of this most important work. I thank you very much for listening. God bless. I guess that before I leave, I need to make a comment on the bill earlier referred to by Professor Asiwaju. Now that I have the details of it, my commitment is to first search out where it is, because I'm surprised to learn that it has been passed for so long. And I think in the ordinary course of things, once the bill has passed through both houses, then it is only left for His Excellency the President to give his assent. And if there is no denial of assent communicated to the National Assembly, then I'm very hopeful that it has either been assented to or it is on its way to being assented to. So I will make those inquiries and give Professor Asiwaju the feedback. I also want to, on a personal note, registered my gratitude to Professor Asiwaju. He remains one of the distinguished professors that inspired us. I started my tertiary education in the Faculty of Arts, Department of History. And I read history at Unilag 1981 to 84, before going on to read law in the same university. And the discussion that transpired earlier, talking about languages and the requirement that students of history must learn the language of the places where they study. We were compelled at the time, it was compulsory to study French. But we were young and quite impatient at the time, so we couldn't understand why we were being made to study French. I wish I had paid more attention. So I just barely passed through the classes. But now I realize that it was really an important policy position to take, because as a student of history in West Africa, you cannot cross the boundaries of one or two countries before you run into French territory. So if you can only speak English, that will be a distinct limitation. So I hope that that idea is still being implemented in our universities. So once again, I thank you very much for giving me this time. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the assurance. Please, another round of applause for him. We will do two quick things. One of them, of course, will be to take a little peek into the book, and then we'll get the review, the book review, and the publisher's comment. Let's welcome Professor Joseph again to do us the honors. Please put your hands together for him as he comes over to talk to us a little about the book. We have talked a lot about it. He will just speak to his review, and then we'll go into the main business of the day. Distinguished Senator is waiting to kickstart that process. Please put your hands together for him.
His Excellency, the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, ably represented by Dr. Akweya, the chairman of this occasion, distinguished Professor Nuhu Yakub, the distinguished Senator, Senator Adeola Diaremo of Yewa, Kabiyesi, the Onimeko of Imeko, other distinguished personalities here, my senior colleagues, professors, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, gentlemen of the press. It's a delight for me to be here, and I'm quite aware that our time is far spent. A book review, especially of this magnitude, could be very boring to a non-academic audience. So given the excellent performance of the panelists and what Baba has also provided, we have agreed that in order not to waste your time, we don't need to go into an elaborate review of this book. So I'll just be here briefly to give you the comments from our publishers, that's the Pan-African University Press. I'm representing them also, apart from being a book reviewer. But before then, I want to crave your indulgence to say one or two things. I won't take your time. I want to explain my qualifications for being here because you'll be surprised. Baba, that's Emeritus Professor Asiwaju, did not just teach me, he taught the professors that taught me. And I became a professor some 10 years ago. So I'm his academic grandson. And you know, grandsons are normally indulged. So it's because he wants to indulge me that he insisted that I have to be here and perform this function. Again, I know a bit of the background to this very monumental compendium. It started way back about 4 years ago. I hosted what the people that we describe as the grandmasters of Nigerian history. Those of them that are still alive, I think they're about 8 now. And during that meeting, a 2-day meeting, the idea behind this book became consummated, that it would be nice to put Baba's thought, ideas, what he has done together in a compendium, because you cannot, these books are going out of print. And I was initially saddled with the task of digitizing those collections, which we did. After the digitization, we sat down. Professor Toyin Falola of the University of Texas was also involved. And we're thinking of bringing out this compendium, which will be a compilation of Baba's works, especially these 3 major works. And the compilation will be done by Professor Toyin Falola with my assistance. And after the digitization, we started, but Professor Asiwaju, for who he is, diligent, extremely painstaking, you know, attention to details. There were a series of arguments, and meetings were held. Eventually, he took over and saved us the headache. And that is why, for now, for the first time in the history of what we have been doing, this has been done for Professor Adele Afigbo. It has been done for Professor Atonda. It has been done for Professor Adeajayi. This is the first time we are having this one being done exclusively by the author himself. Because he, according to him, he said that people have been advising him about physical exercise, but that he feels mental exercise is even more important than physical exercise. So I think we need to salute his courage. An octogenarian who is putting this together. When some people, after becoming professors, they feel that they've seen it all and that they can just close shop. But Baba continues to try. So it's a pleasure, it's a delight from me. I bring you goodwill from Pan-African University Press, the proud publisher of this book. It is headquartered at Austin in the United States, with branches in South Africa and Ibadan. They are the proud publisher of this book. And in the last less than a decade, they have produced, this will be the 52nd title, if I'm correct. I think Professor, he has a sharper memory than myself, so he'll be able to correct me, but I think this will be the 52nd title that will be produced by Pan-African University Press. And the press is all about the challenge of academic globalization, you know, the peripheralization of the African continent when it comes to the dissemination of intellectual production. That is what this press is addressing. And before I drop the mic, let me reiterate what Baba said earlier, because he also told me yesterday, that this book is about the value of history, historical knowledge. It is about public policy, the nexus between historical knowledge and public policy. It is emphasizing the fact that all knowledge is historical and that we cannot begin to solve our problem. We cannot even begin to think about it unless we go further. We study history. We know how these things have happened in the past, how it has. There's nothing that is happening in Nigeria today. There's nothing that is happening in the world that has not happened before, maybe in another dimension, and that we can always learn from history if we don't neglect our history. Thank you very much for your attention. God bless you.
Thank you very much, our book reviewer and our publisher. The next item is the meat of the matter. After the book review, I actually want to say that we have had reviews from the beginning till this point. This is where we go into the appreciation of reviews. I am very happy that the representative of the Vice President stayed till this point. I know he will do something about it. I had attended a book launch like this some 10 years ago as MC. I didn't know that the person who wrote the book was living in one room apartment. By the time we finished the launch, we sold like 4 copies. We took the remaining to his house. There was no space even for books. These books will not go back to Emeko. We intend to give you here for a fee. The book launch will be championed by one man who himself is a giver. He has served this nation with his life. He has also served with his resources. Today, he will also demonstrate that service. He has spoken about how we can get bills passed. He has also championed the passing of bills. And today, we will pass a vote of confidence in his honor. Our chief launcher, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, is none other than the one who has sat quietly waiting for this moment and is ready for him. If you have your hands, I'll advise that you put them together as I welcome distinguished Senator Solomon Adeola to do us this honors. Please put your hands together properly for him. This is a very important item. He will speak and then he will lead members of the high table to unveil the books further. Please, another round of applause.
Thank you very much, the Master of Ceremony, the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, ably represented by my brother, my very, very good brother, Professor Akweya, which we have been together for over 20 years, serving in one capacity or the other. The chairman of this occasion, Akabesi, the Onimeko of Imeko. Onimeko of Imeko, our father is wearing 2 caps. One is representing the paramount ruler of Yewa land, and at the same time is the direct Kabisi of the emeritus professor, the Onimeko of Imeko. Our father, our leader, the emeritus Professor Anthony Asiwaju, other distinguished members of the high table, ladies and gentlemen. Before I go into launching of this document, I want to say a few words, because it is always a great pleasure, given this kind of platform and opportunity, to say 1 or 2 things about what we are doing at any given point in time. As you're all aware, we are your representative. We speak on your behalf, we represent you, and also intervene on your behalf on critical issues. And the issues before us this afternoon, which has to do with bridging the African boundaries, the issue of border controls, we agree that it has been an issue that has been in the front burner. I was asking my father, Professor, that why is this order not filled to capacity? He said, the invitation is based on institution, and that is why everybody that is in this hall are either representing one institution or one agencies of the government. And I said, yes, it is good to do that, but at the same time, we, on this side of the divide, the politicians, the academicians, the professor, we always gather together and discuss all these salient issues. But those that will really implement all this we are saying are not here. And that is why I would suggest maybe we organize a more bigger workshop that will involve all those that are involved in the issue of boundaries and all boundary matters across the length and breadth of this country. If you could recollect, there was a day during the issue of, we were discussing about resource control in the Federal House of Reps, where all these communities who are into oil and gas production were invited. At a point in the discussion, they have to start exchanging blows. They have to start fighting publicly on live TV. What is the issue? It has to do with border control, border issues of these host communities. Aside that, we are all a living witness when Nigeria lost our all-rich Bakassi Peninsula to Cameroon due to lack of information on the issue of the borders. Where I come from, we are predominantly surrounded by borders. We both from Ipokia, Imeko. Once you cross, the next community next door is Benin Republic. And from there, you will continue to go to Ghana, Togo, all the sub-West African countries. So I can refer to where I come from as a major border community in Nigeria. So what we are doing here today is not something that we are just here to launch book, but rather to speak to the real issues. All the issue of porous borders across the length and breadth of our countries, people who have infiltrated our countries and who have embarked on the journey of kidnapping us, banditries, and all other things, is as a result of lack of proper border controls. So it's a very important issue that we are looking at today, and I must say this, all our institutions across the length and breadth of this country must have a copy of these books. Our history teachers in our higher, in our colleges, that is the secondary schools, should also have an idea of this. Because when the emeritus professor, while adding his voice to the panelists, he mentioned something, that the challenges confronting us has to do with ourselves trying to inflict this injury on ourselves by not taking the right step. For instance, on the issue of the institute, we have passed the bill into law. But for us to make it a law, the president has to assent his signature. And I've told him, talk to the deputy chief of staff to the president. Thank God he's a lawyer, a renowned lawyer. He knows the import of all of this. And I'm happy he has taken the information, and I can tell you by the grace of God, in the next couple of months, that institute will be a reality. Sir, I am a beneficiary of one of the books of the professor. You know, I am born in Lagos. I served in Lagos as a member of House of Assembly, House of Reps, before becoming a senator. But at some point, I decided I don't want to stay in Lagos. I want to go back to my roots. And that is Yewa land, where the Prof comes from. And it was a little bit of a challenge when some people were of the opinion that, how can you come from Lagos and come to Ogun State? But I'm from Ogun State. Everything about me, yes, I might have been in Lagos, but I'm from Ogun State. But in one of the books written by the professor about Yewa land, that gives the rundown of list of communities that are in Yewa land, my community tends to fall under that. And he discusses extensively that the community had issues during the Dahomey War that were scattered and everything. And at the end of the day, that laid to rest the issue of why are you coming to Lagos, from Lagos to Ogun. So as a beneficiary of that book, so many of us, and there is a lot he can do. As for me, I don't know about anybody. The only living Nigerian who is so passionate about the issue of borders in Nigeria that I know is Professor Anthony Asiwaju. That is so, for every occasion he has invited me to, it has borders only on border control, border issues and everything. There is no any other issues that they have discussed about. And so when the former DG of Nigerian border agency was speaking there, the retired PAMSEC, he said, after the doctorate degree, once you finish it, you move to another one. But Prof have refused to move. He has remained where he is, which is only on border, and border. And what that goes to show is that this is one emerging issues that we must tackle, that we must look into, that we must study, that we must have enough information about. Just yesterday, Kuje prison was attacked. If you listen, if you have watched the video and listened to those what they are saying, I don't think those people are Nigerians. What is the real issue? Lack of proper border controls. And we need to address all these salient issues. It is very, very important. It is not about the legislator alone, but even the community leaders, those that are directly involved on a day-to-day activities, need to listen to the Prof, because the document is not about the border, anything about border alone, but the crisis and problem solving. That is how we can resolve this issue of border crisis day in, day out. A lot of scholars have spoken here today. They have addressed us. They have mentioned critical issues that we believe that at least we can use to solve all these our crises relating to border issues and everything. But the issue is, how do we implement all of this that has been said? And implementation is not about we, the legislator. It's not only the executive also who is saddled with the responsibility, but we need the direct involvement of relevant stakeholders at the grassroots level also to be involved. I give you an instance. In our own area, in my own community in Akweya, we have the Nigerian Customs Service, who is there to protect the entry into the country, any form of imported goods, who have not fulfilled all necessary paperwork. But while doing that, they got entangled with the people living in that community, and there were crises. For them to stay is a problem, because the people believe that the border is just next to them, so they can cross over, get something and come back. And the customs said no. It was a major issue. And that is only in one part of the country. And this is how it is scattered across the length and breadth of our country. What are we doing to this? So day in, day out, customs end up killing the people living around that community. And there are no solutions in sight, except anytime there are issues like that, we have to call for a dialogue meeting. and all these solutions we are looking at, asking for, is contained in this document that is before us. And I've assured Prof, thank God, the Deputy Chief of Staff has assured us that in the next couple of weeks or so, we should have the law in place, and also any workshop that we would like to organize to reach out to as many as we want. Prof, I will be there to support by the grace of God. Now, in launching this book, as I've said, it's not about me getting this book and taking it home. It's ensuring that all the relevant institutions and agencies of the government that are supposed to have, that I can afford to get for, I will make sure I purchase some of them. And agencies such as the National Institute of Legislative Studies, that is the arm of government within the legislature that are saddled with the responsibility of training and retraining Nigerian legislators, not only the National Assembly, the state legislature. And I believe that if we have some of these books in place, it will go a long way in making research when there are issues concerning motions on borders or bills on borders on border issues as far as it affects our nation. This book will be a veritable source of research for this institute, for them to advise the legislator on the issues that is currently before them. Also, the National Assembly Library. We will buy some of this and keep in the library, because now we are trying to build a library within the National Assembly so that we can have historical facts of activities that borders on our what we do, or what some of the Nigerians who have contributed to the development of this nation have done in the past. We can have them in our own library. So we'll be buying some of this book. All institutions within my senatorial district, where I currently represent, and where I'm going to represent come 2023, because I have moved finally from Lagos to Ogun, and to represent Ogun West, that is the Yewa land. So the institution around that area, some of these books will also be purchased and be given to them to be in their library for research purposes. I want to say this, Prof, I'm going to ask for a favor, that any quantity or amount I'm going to mention that I will, the number of books I'll be buying, I want you to personally autograph all of these books for us, so that people will know that, yes, these books is written by Professor Anthony Asiwaju, and also it was personally autographed by him, and it will remain in their library. And at any point in time when reference has been made to this book, they can also see that it was properly autographed and it is books emanating from you. On that note, I will be buying 100 of these books at the sum of 10 million naira. You know, there's a politician, don't mention figure, but I'm launching my father's book, my father's project, so I can mention figure, 10 million naira. Thank you.
Please put your hands together for him. Distinguished Senator and Professor Yakubu will now lead members of the high table to go and unveil the book on the floor of the House. The books are just there. We'll just unveil it down here. Distinguished Senator, please put your hands together for the Senator. He's a Senator who speaks and he accomplishes. Today, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, by the virtue of the powers bestowed on me as MC, I will declare distinguished Senator as Senator Yayi without border. Please put your hands together for me. Distinguished Senator, you're now free to contest in any constituency you are free to.
Just pull it.
You now help us unveil, sir.
Thank you very much. I unveil and launch this all-important document of bridging the African boundaries, written by our father, our leader, Professor Anthony Asiwaju, to the benefit of the Federal Republic of Nigeria and beyond, and to the benefit of mankind. Thank you.
Very much.
A copy is okay.
Okay, we'll just hold it for the press. Those copies in your hands are actually for sale. I'll just allow you 1 minute to just say something about the book. So I know that you don't say things publicly, but just say something.
Thank you. I actually had a message from His Excellency the Vice President for the author. All of the agencies, and two of them at least are represented here, will get copies for the use of those agencies. But for the presidency, we will take 5 copies for our library there. And I will communicate the amount to the distinguished author, Professor Asiwaju.
Yes,
Thank you very much.
So that's for the presidency. You don't want personal copies for your library?
I will discuss with my professor.
Thank you very much, sir. I will just start from here and go around. I will know who to avoid, so I just say something.
Well, I've had the privilege of going through the book even before today. And just like I said in the goodwill message, that the agency is going to provide copies of this to 4 universities, 2 in the northern part of the country and then 2 in the southern part of the country that belong to border states. And as His Excellency has also directed, I'm sure we are going to have more copies from the presidency. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
As I represent the National Boundary Commission, it's an in-house affair. So we already have copies of this from the last workshop that we had, because we are the son of the soil. So, but also, as the Vice President have said, it's a directives. We are going to take more copies, and on the authority of my Director General, he said he is going to call the author and he is going to announce the number of copies and the amount that the National Boundary Commission is taking for these books. It's a very important compendium to the management of Nigeria's internal and international boundaries. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Two copies, one for my university and one for my personal library. Thank you.
So you don't want to tell us how much? You can announce, it's free. Okay. No, publishers pay now. Okay.
Well, the cover price.
The cover price? We have not announced cover price today. Please, let's clap for the publisher. They did a good job working this book. We appreciate your effort.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Today I would have loved to be a delegate as a delegate, I would have loved to.
Let me stay away.
Yes, but I'm not. Secondly, you know that we have been on strike in the past 5 months. Teachers in the university, no salary, but nevertheless, as I represent a university, I will take 5 copies, but on one condition: there should be an invoice, so that I will not be summoned to face the senator in the National Assembly. I will take 5 copies for, I think it's 100,000. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
I think I have already had a preview of this book by the very good advertisement put forward for the launching today. And I dream to have a hand on this. Well, being somebody virtually on his own, I think I'm going to take 1 copy, but it's going to be far above the cover price. So, and I'll discuss that with the author. It's an honor.
Thank you very much.
Asiwaju and the distinguished senator.
Well,
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Go ahead, sir.
okay. I thought I would listen. If not, also. Well, I'm taking 1 copy of the book, and I'm paying, I don't know what is here, but I am going to give my contribution. I think it's about 50,000.
Thank you very much, sir. Mr. Chairman, we appreciate you.
Thank you very much. The Nigerian Institute of Policy and Strategic Studies is a government establishment, and we know that copies will be bought for us. But on behalf of my DG, I'll be picking 2 copies here today for the amount that I would, of course, see those responsible for. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Please, let's make account numbers available. Some people want to make transfers now. Let's have them.
I'm from University of Abuja, representing the Vice Chancellor, Professor Abdul Rashid Nala. I am so excited with this book. I've attended so many book launch, and I've looked at the subject of books, and this one is exciting me. To the extent that I've sent this notice to the Association of University Librarians to notify them that something like this, it's available. And I think this book should be in every library in Nigeria. It should be there. On behalf of my Vice Chancellor, I'm going to pick 5 copies of this book. And being a university, we don't launch, we don't call prizes, like I was told, but we're actually also going to pay. We just need the invoice, as my colleague from the university just said. So we are picking 5 copies of this book. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate you, ma'am. I think we can allow this table to go back and be reconstituted while I go to the other members of the House of Reps who are here present. Ma'am, they said this book should be in all libraries, and you are one of our very important librarians here. So please speak to us.
Daddy, congratulations, Daddy.
Members of the high table will now go back to the top. We are still taking contributions.
Contributions, sir.
Oh, okay.
On behalf of the Rector of the Federal Polytechnic and the entire institution, that's Federal Polytechnic Ilaro, I, Dr. Bola Atuluma, the Polytechnic Librarian, is to pick 10 copies of this on behalf of the Rector for the sum of 200,000 naira.
200,000 naira. Thank you very much. The Polytechnic. That is the Polytechnic that appreciates books. Thank you very much. I'll be coming to the audience. This audience is a VIP. I want to start with Dr. Husseini Abdu. He's our panelist, our moderator. We also appreciate books.
Yes, we do appreciate books. I thought I'm an insider. Okay, I will buy a copy for my office at anyway at 50,000, one copy from my office, and then we buy additional three copies for myself also at 150,000. So that's 200.
200,000 naira.
So give me the three.
Please bring 3 copies here. 200,000. 200. Sir, okay, he's giving you.
No, I'm in front of you. See,
Honorable, sir.
Well, Kemi has already bought me a copy. Well, I picked one for the cover price. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please, one here. One here. It's good to take 2 home. Because some people know how to borrow books. When they read this, some pages will be cleaned.
Our protocol is observed. On behalf of my commandant, National Institute for Security Studies, Lower Usmadam, Abuja, who ordinarily would have loved to be here, but because of pressing assignment outside the country, he has sent me to represent him. So on his behalf and the institute, we buy 5 copies of the book, and the price will be communicated to the author. Thank you.
All right, Secretariat, 5 copies here, please. 5 copies. Thank you. Please put your hands together for him. Let me go to businesses growing, friends and families pay.
My name is Abdurazak Olakito. Standing here on the instance of Yoruba Descendants Union Abuja, and I have been asked by the president of the union to launch this book for 20,000 naira per copy. And on personal notes, I really feel elated to be here because I can see my professors from the University of Abuja, starting with Professor Nuhu Yakubu. He was the VC at the time. My Professor Bawuru Barikindo, Dr. Awal, and Professor Akinwumi, who is the present VC of Kogi State University. I will personally launch 1 copy for 10,000 naira. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We may need a combination of your colleagues to be able to get a book. We can give you the photocopy. But sir, you meant to say something. Please, I want to accord everybody the opportunity of buying this book. Thank you, sir.
My name is Dr. Oro Yu Oro. My boss has asked me to have 5 copies of this book for 100,000.
100,000 naira. Please, Secretariat, this way. Thank you, sir.
We want to have a receipt.
Yes. Please, Secretariat, 5 copies here. 5 copies here. 5 copies. Please, everybody should have an opportunity of owning this book. If you want, just call my attention. Let me go to our friends from Canada to find out. Are they here? Where are they seated? So we'll give them the opportunity. We actually collect pounds and euro and dollars. So have you seen the book?
Yes, I've seen it.
You want? I want
to have a copy, yes.
Okay, you can say something. Just speak to this audience. How many copies?
Just 1 copy, please.
1 copy. Okay. You want to tell me the price in foreign currency?
Whatever the price is.
The cover price. Okay. I know the cover price in Naira. I don't know it in dollars. Secretariat, please bring a copy here. Hello. Bring one copy here, please. This book is going to Canada today. If you have not gotten a copy, please, can you just call my attention? So have you bought your copies? Have you collected your copies of the book, sir? Okay, sir.
Yeah, my name is Oluseyi Fatuyi. On behalf of the Fatuyi descendants, I'm launching this book for 100,000 Naira. Just 2 copies.
2 copies, 100,000. So you want them to launch too?
Yes, please.
Okay. He said I should give you to launch.
I will take 2 copies for 100,000 Naira.
100,000. Sir, did you say 200? Sir, 200?
Yeah, I will write the check.
200? Sir, you have launched before? You are not in the mood to launch.
You will launch later.
So we have a few more copies up for sale. Please, who is selling? There's a copy there. We'll take the copy. He will tell you how much. Well, traditionally, we sell this book. In the bookshop, it's 50,000 for the hard copy, 40,000 for the soft back. But if you want soft copy, you can pay 20,000. And you read it. The book is over 900 pages, and it means a whole lot. So we are still taking Please, Secretariat, this way. So we are paying, please let's follow through. If you need POS, we have a POS in the house. If you also want to do transfer, there's an account. If you want to pay cash, it's preferred. Bring cash. We have a few more minutes to just sell this. If you buy a book, make sure you look at the content of the bag that we give to you, because some bag is small chops that is inside you. So you don't buy small chops. Okay. All right, it's been sorted. Thank you. Where's our POS? POS is that way. So take one copy to our friend from Canada. Please, if you ordered and we have not delivered, please let us know so we can do that quickly. Please, we need recruitment. Some people want to buy books. They need delivery, please. All these people, they find work. Can't we recruit them now as ushers? It's not good to recruit usher on book launch deal. May usher and money no loss.
Straight away.
So while we are waiting to finish buying the books, it will not be good that you attended this program and you did not get acknowledged. So to help us deliver the vote of thanks is a prince of Imeko land. Very soon we'll call him a Basharu. Diego Okenyodo. Please put your hands together for him as he takes the vote of thanks.
Thank you very much, Ben. You are my SSA. I don't have a PVC to vote to conduct these votes, but my PVC is going to work. I really want to thank everyone for being here and for contributing immensely to the success of this launch of Bridging African Boundaries. What you've done has contributed immensely to national development and even to the growth of Africa. We really want to thank those who have, they are silent, they have done a lot, particularly the Executive Secretary of the National Universities Commission, who ensured that this hall was made available for the use for this purpose. We thank the Office of the Vice President and particularly the representative of the Vice President, Dr. Rahman Ikpaye. We also thank every other person, the reviewers, the publisher, the vice chancellors, all who are present, distinguished senators, and without also forgetting His Royal Majesty, the Onimeko of Imeko, for coming all the way and making sure he honors our daddy for this great inspirational work. We would like to thank the Committee of Vice Chancellors and every other person that has made this possible. Thank you, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, still, please put your hands together for him, for giving us a beautiful message. I'm sure that
what's your sister?
We thank you. Please, if you have not gotten a copy of this book, make sure you take it. It's not too expensive. It's something you can afford. Please, we appreciate. I will now go to the high table. The chairman will now officially close the program, and we will take the national anthem after that. Mr. Chairman, sir.
Thank you so very much. On behalf of our distinguished father, the author of the book we have launched, I want to thank everybody who has come to witness this occasion, and also who have helped us to launch the book. We pray that God will take all of us home safely, and that we shall continue to spread the message. This book is a must for every library in this country. This book is so important that people should have it, read it, and make sure that the message contained therein is spread to others. We thank you so very much, and we also thank the distinguished author that has brought all of us together here. We continue to pray for his sound health and long life. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will now rise as we take the national anthem to signify the end of this program. We'll be singing the national anthem after 3. 1, 2, go.